Sponsored by Taylor Freelance, Rainier Ballistics, Hodgdon Powders, and JPL Precision.
Good morning, Power Factor fans. I'm Rick. We're going to do a little segment in addition to the CCP episode we've done. When I saw that the new rules, I looked at them: 4-inch barrel, 8-round capacity, 37 ounces, and I don't own any guns that fit within those dimensions except my Detonics Combat Master, which only holds 7 rounds, or actually six or 7 rounds. So that's not really competitive. Major power, not really competitive. So I'm thinking, oh, maybe I should get a CCP gun. And as you know from a couple of episodes back, last summer I was awarded, I guess as a Lifetime Achievement Award, a new Springfield Range Officer 45. And it was a great gun. I really liked it. I didn't shoot it all that much, but I've got enough 45s and have owned enough 45s over the years that I could just tell just from handling it, firing it at one match, dry firing it extensively. It's a really nice gun. But I just thought, you know, I've got 2 or 3 5-inch 45s, the gun that I normally shoot in CDP and single stack. I've also shot it in limited 10, and so I've got my Commander, and I just go, I don't really need another 5-inch 45. As much as I appreciated the thought that went into it, I'm thinking, do I have an emotional attachment to this gun or not? And I just thought, the guys who gave me the gun want me to be happy. I think that's what they really wanted. So I sold the Range Officer. And then I'm thinking, okay, what do I want for CCP? So again, back to the dimensions. What fits in the box? What is going to be the hot ticket? And immediately, if you go to the forums, IDPA forum, ENOS, people start throwing out ideas. I think this is going to be like the trick gun that everybody's going to want for CCP. And I saw some pictures of some CZ derivatives, Tanfoglio pistols, Witness type pistols with 4-inch barrels, and I guess they were compact pistols but with extended magazines in them. That was another thing, is of course, as long as it fits in the box, it doesn't matter how long the mag is. So I'm seeing these guns with short barrels but extended magazines to give them a full grip. But a lot of them are plastic. They're only weighing 25 ounces or something, but the limit for CCP is 37 ounces, which of course would allow essentially any gun that will fit in the box, even if it's all steel, would be legal. And then there's the debate between road-hugging weight. Do you want a heavy gun that resists recoil? I mean, I think that's the idea behind it. A big heavy gun is not going to be moving around as much in recoil. Or do you want a lighter gun that's faster handling, maybe a little quicker on the draw, quicker transitions? As somebody said, splits, which is where your benefit is going to be with a heavy gun, you're not going to see. It's the difference between a guy who has really, really good splits and a guy that has only mediocre splits. It's like 1/100 of a second. I mean, it's not, you're not saving, even over the course of an 18-round course of fire, you're not going to save a whole lot of time on splits. But if your draw is 1/4 of a second faster and your transitions are 1/4 of a second faster, or even 1/10 of a second faster, that really adds up. So there's this kind of a, what is it I want to do, the heavy gun or the light gun? And people say, well, you look at who's winning the national championships, they're shooting these heavier guns. And I thought, well, but are the guys who are winning national championships shooting heavier guns because that's the gun they prefer, or are they shooting heavier guns because their sponsor makes heavy guns? I think I tend to look more at what local shooters are shooting than what national champions are shooting, because a lot of the time the national champions are shooting the guns that are provided for them. And so they maybe shoot the gun that that manufacturer makes that's best suited, but it's not necessarily the best suited gun. So at the local level, I think in CCP you're going to see the Glock 19s and lighter weight guns, XDs, the guns that people are already shooting in ESP and SSP, even if the national champion is shooting a Witness with an extended magazine. So I'm looking at specs. One of the guns, and I've probably talked about this before, my formative years of shooting and my interest in firearms was back in the 70s and 80s. I was reading American Rifleman in the late 60s. I had a subscription to Guns and Ammo in the late 70s. My dad was reading all that stuff, Shooting Times and everything. And there were certain guns that when you're a kid, it's just like you look at cars, you know, oh man, I wanted a 1976 Porsche Turbo Carrera. I had a giant poster on my wall. And just at the same thing, I would have had a giant poster of a Bren 10 or a giant poster of a Colt Gold Cup or something, you know, these guns that I thought, man, these are so cool. But of course, you know, when you're 12 years old, you don't actually think about having one. You think, you know, someday maybe I'll get to have one. And one of the guns that always kind of interested me was the Smith & Wesson Model 39. And the history behind that is right after World War II, the U.S. military was kind of comparing its weapons to those of its recently departed opponents. And for some reason, the U.S. military was really enamored of the Walther P-38. They thought that the double action function was really cool. And most of the major powers of the world were migrating towards 9mm. The British were, by that point, issuing the high power in 9mm. Of course, the Germans were using 9mm. A lot of the satellites were using 9mm. So the U.S. was thinking, you know, do we want to go get a new pistol? You know, the 1911's been in service now for, you know, 50 years, 40 years. And so there was I don't know if the military was asking so much as the industry was offering. With the end of the war, all these contracts were canceled. So of course the gun makers would have to go back to producing guns for the commercial market. But all the contracts for M1 Garands and everything had all been canceled or filled. Colt offered up a lightweight 9mm version of the 1911 as a possible alternative. Aluminum frame, 9mm chambering, 4 1/4 inch barrel, so a little bit lighter and handier, holds a few more rounds. Smith & Wesson offered up a gun dimensionally very similar, but more like the P-38, and then it had double action, single action trigger, slide mounted hammer drop type safety. So it was the same kind of envelope, same size, same shape as the Commander, aluminum alloy frame, 9mm, but with the double action trigger. And the U.S. government kind of looked at both of them and thought, yeah, they are nice enough, but we've got, you know, hundreds of thousands of 1911s. We've got enough spare parts to last for 50 years. We've got enough ammo to last for 50 years. Thanks, but no thanks. So Colt took their pistol, put it into production as the Commander. Smith & Wesson took their pistol, put it into production as the Model 39. And this was about 1955. And the gun had some problems. There were problems with the ejector, feed reliability, but by the 1960s, it had been improved enough that it was now the Model 39-2, and the Illinois State Police Department adopted it as their standard sidearm. And that was the first 9mm semi-automatic pistol adopted by any major police force. And that kind of started the ball rolling for the mass conversion of American police forces from the double-action revolver to essentially the 9mm pistol. I mean, there were always some outlying departments that issued 45s and departments that allowed people to carry the gun that they wanted, carried different things, 41 Magnums and whatnot, but major police departments were mostly all issuing .38 special revolvers until the mid-1960s when the Illinois State Police adopted the Model 39-2. Well, Smith & Wesson, some years later, upgraded the Model 39, adding fully adjustable sights, and it was a steel slide on an alloy frame, so they offered an all-steel model and a stainless steel model. So what had been the 39-2 became the 439, and the 3-digit designation is what distinguishes the first generation Smith & Wesson autos from the second generation. So 439 means it's a steel slide on an alloy frame based on this Model 39. 539 means it's an all-steel gun. 639 means it's all stainless steel. So that model went into production in the early 1980s. I want to say it was like 1981 or 82. And the 439 was a pretty good seller. The 639 was a pretty good seller. But the thing that's interesting about the 539 is even if you go back and look at publications from the day, Gun Digest, Gun Reviews, the 539 doesn't even show up. I mean, when they review the 439, they talk about the 639, but they don't even mention the 539. It was like the redheaded stepchild. But the thing that I liked about it is that it weighs 36.5 ounces. It's a 4-inch, 8-round, 9mm, single stack 8-round magazines, 36.5 ounces, 4-inch barrel. So what does that sound like? That sounds like the gun designed for CCP division. It's the biggest, heaviest gun that will fit in the box with a 4-inch barrel. Now, the problem I immediately ran into is that it doesn't have a 4-inch barrel. It has a 4.12-inch barrel. And as I mentioned in the CCP specific segment, if you're going to go out and buy a 4-inch gun for use in CCP division, make absolutely certain that the barrel is not longer than 4.1 inches. I'm probably, if I pursue CCP, the gun that I bought, I'm probably going to have JPL shave the 2/100ths of an inch off the muzzle in case anybody wants to measure it. But anyway, so I start looking around for a 439. Maybe it's 4, 5, 6 ounces lighter, but I'm thinking I really want that road hugging weight. Back to the do I want the quick transitions or do I want the nice stable platform? And I go on Gunbroker and here's a 539. Cheap starting bid, no reserve. So I throw a bid on there, and nobody else is bidding. And I'm thinking, it says the gun is absolutely like new, perfect finish, test fired only, if that. Difficult to photograph because of the brilliant, perfect mirror bright finish. And I'm like going, how come nobody's bidding on this? I mean, if like I was talking to the producer earlier, I said if this had been a Colt Gold Cup, it would have been $2,500 or something. I put in my my bid, very reasonable price, and nobody else is bidding. So I go over to the Smith & Wesson forum and I'm starting to think, mirror bright finish. So I put in an inquiry. Did Smith & Wesson have mirror bright finishes, back in the early 80s? And I'm not getting any responses. So then I'm starting to sweat. I'm like, this gun's been refinished. The reason it looks like new is because it's recently been refinished. And I've now paid almost like collector prices for a used refinished gun. What I thought I was going to get was a almost perfect, pristine gun, and so I'm sweating it a little bit. Nobody else bids, so I'm just like, oh no, geez, everybody else can tell it's refinished. So I wake up the morning after the end of the auction. Oh, you're the winner. So I make arrangements to have it sent to JPL. It shows up, and I call him, John. How does it look? He goes, well, it looks like it's brand new. And he said, what color were you expecting it to be? And I said, black. He says, well, it's not black. Well, the reason it was mirror polished is because it's nickel plated. And I knew that they'd made 539s in nickel plating, but the photograph on the Gunbroker ad, they must have photographed it with reflecting a black background, because even after I knew it was nickel plated, I went back and looked at the photos and it still didn't look like it was silver. It looked like it was polished blue. But anyway, it's a nickel plated Model 539. And so I do a little more research, and they only made 8,000 Model 539s in a 3-year period. They only made 8,000, and fewer than 2,000 of those were nickel plated. So it's a pretty rare gun. I don't know if I should put on my sunglasses before I pull it out, but here it is. Here it is in all of its beauty. Let's see if I can get, oh yeah, there you go. Get those sunglasses out. So it's, it was going to be my CCP secret weapon. Everybody's saying, oh no, go get, get that little lightweight Glock Model 19. I'm like, no, we're going heavy metal. 36.5 ounces, soon to be 4.1-inch barrel. But I racked the slide back when I got it. I was still over at John's working on the paperwork, and there's little flakes of stuff in there, and John said, oh, that's been fired, And then after I took it apart and looked at it, the little flakes were like fossilized gun oil. And I don't know if it had been fired. It might have been, in 1982. But I see very little evidence of it being fired. You can see on the muzzle, there's almost no wear where the bushing slides over the end of the muzzle here. And in the breech face, usually you get a little ring around the firing pin hole, and there's no marks on it. There's vertical kind of machine marks or polishing marks on the breech face. But I don't know that this gun has been other than test firing if it has been fired. So now I'm debating, and the trigger is terrible. I mean, that's one of the things, if you read about, I was a disciple of Jeff Cooper when I was 12 years old, and he referred to double action pistols as crunchin' tickers, because you get this long, gritty double action pull, then it transitions to the short, gritty single action pull, and just in dry firing it, you feel all these hitches in the trigger. And there's a Series 80 style firing pin block in here, just like essentially identical to what you find in a Colt 1911 or a 1911 pistols from SIG or Auto Ordnance. There's a little lever in the top of the frame, and so you get there's a little bit of a sense of I don't know if you can't have creep in a double action trigger pull, but you feel kind of a little hitch as it is activating the firing pin block. And then as everything starts moving in there, it's not especially smooth. And I may have how do you like that? I may get a trigger job done on it, but I just haven't really decided now. I'm kind of cooling to the idea of shooting it at all. I mean, I'm not a gun collector in the sense that I buy a gun and then put it away, whether because it's going to increase in value or whatever the reason. I sold the range officer because I didn't think I'd shoot it very much because I already have other 45s. Now I bought this gun and I feel like I owe it to the preservation of Smith & Wesson, vintage Smith & Wessons, to maybe not shoot it. But I did order 3 new mags for it, so that would tend to mean that no matter what I'm saying, having 4 mags for it, you don't need 4 mags for a gun you don't shoot. But anyway, but if you're a Smith & Wesson collector and you want to save this gun from scratches and handling marks, give me a call. I mean, it's not really necessarily for sale, but it's cool. I like it. I mean, it's one of those childhood dream kind of things. Someday maybe I'll have a Brent 10 and a gold cup, but I got my 539 anyway, and if I do take it out in CCP action, I'll report back how it worked out. Trying to master the finger position. I'm so used to single action triggers that weigh about 3.5 pounds that I'm really kind of struggling with. I can tell just in dry fire that if I try to pull the trigger like this, the reach to the trigger when the hammer actually falls is way back here, so I'm getting a lot of movement in the gun. So even for single action fire, I'm essentially using this kind of double action alignment of the finger on the trigger for both double action shooting and for single action shooting, which is not normal for me, but when I do it that way, the sights aren't moving. So I don't know if I'm not sure how much time and energy I want to put into developing essentially a new, different shooting technique just for this gun. But all these thoughts are still kind of rolling around in here, so I'm not really sure how it's going to go. But I figure I can, even if I can't hit anything with it, I maybe can blind my opponents. So I think it's a good defensive weapon in that sense. I'll just stand next to the firing line, kind of going like this with it, and we'll see how that goes. But anyway, Smith & Wesson 539, CCP secret weapon or absolute dead end. We're not sure yet, but there it is.